the bank is our client, so they're the ones that we're working for, even though the buyers, a lot of times, are writing the check for the appraisal.
And that's why it's a partnership too. And even that's how we look at the appraisers. They may not work for us, but we look at it as we're here working with the bank to try to make sure, because honestly, we want to know. We're in the middle of buying a property. So if that appraiser comes back and sees something that we don't, I want to know what should be in the forefront of their mind and what can they do to help you guys with your job.
What's going on, guys? Thanks so much for tuning in to the Self-Storage Income Podcast. This week, we've got a special release for you guys. We're going to be re-releasing one of our episodes that we did with Tim Garey from Cushman and Wakefield. This episode has so many phenomenal bits and pieces for you guys to really take away and succeed in finding and funding self-storage, valuing it. Tim shares with us how he goes through the valuation process when looking at storage facilities. He talks about how to coordinate with banks, with sellers, and all of those players that you're going to need to bring together in that transaction. He also talks about how self-storage is valued, how some of those things change over time, the metrics that affect those different values of storage facilities and the assets there. So really, really valuable information, whether you're just starting out or you're a veteran. Really, really good industry insight from Tim here today. Really excited to share this with you guys again. Again, it's one of our top 10 episodes. Can't wait for you guys to jump in. Check it out.
Welcome, everybody, to the podcast. We are so excited to jump in on this today. We have gone over so much at the beginning of the year in the self-storage world and what has been going on, what has been changing. We've talked a lot about interest rates. We have a really great guest today that we are actually bringing on a topic that we have not hit on yet on the podcast. And it's overdue. We need to. Very, very important part of the process, and we're really excited to jump into this.
Yeah, man, it's going to be a good episode. There's going to be a ton of value here today. Like you said, it's a topic that we really haven't touched in depth. So I want to give you a huge warm welcome to Tim with Cushman Wakefield coming in, talking all things self-storage appraisals, letting us know, what the pulse is on the market with, interest rates and what you're seeing out there with banks and the interaction there, and the whole process of what, that we were talking before the podcast, that appraisal 101 scenario. What does it look like? What's it for? All the ins and outs, what that relationship looks like between, the buyer, the seller, the bank, how you guys plug into the process. Huge number of our listeners are, first-time storage owner operators, buyers, sellers, different things like that. So Tim, thanks so much for coming on, man, hanging out with us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
The weather's great.
It is.
Happy to be
right?
here. Yeah.
It's like, all right, the sun came out. This is
It was a little
great.
rainy in Portland when I left.
Yeah. You're out of the Portland office, right? Yeah, no, it's rainy, cloudy.
So why don't you give people a quick background into you, what you've done and what you do?
So I started getting into appraisal. My dad was in real estate development, and summer after I graduated from high school, didn't want to do the usual job. So my dad said, "Hey, why don't you go work for this appraisal company for the summer?" And at that point I was, taking photos and, running things. And then I went to school, went away, came back and worked the summers in the appraisal. And so it kind of turned into this full-time deal. So it was a local sort of shop that I worked with. And after being with them for about 5 or 6 years, I realized I wanted to do something a little bit more. Went over to Cushman Wakefield. It has more of a national platform, and had been there for probably 6-7 years, and was kind of being a generalist, finding my way around, appraising shopping centers and industrial buildings and golf courses and just a lot of different things. And then we worked with a group out of Southern California that they came on as a self-storage appraisal group. So I joined that group about 15, 16 years ago and been primarily appraising self-storage since then. That person left, went on to a different company. Somebody else came in as a practice leader. She has since left, and about 2 years ago, I took over the practice lead for Cushman Wakefield. We have about 30 members across the country that just do self-storage appraisal, and I manage that group. We do portfolio work. If there's something goes sideways, they bring me in to clean it up,
Yep.
So, but it's great. I still do a little self-storage, as you know, from here, here and there. And and I just like I like the asset class. I just think it's really unique. It's different from any other asset class. It's got very it's easy to follow along, but if you don't know how it operates, then you can really it's what's the word I'm thinking of? It can really go sideways if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've seen a very big change in perspective too, in general, on the market of value of storage.
Oh, absolutely.
How people, especially maybe even outside the industry, view that, like banks. And why don't you tell us a little bit about overall perception of that? Because, for all of us, and you included, that are in it, you get that value.
Right.
But a lot of people, including, still shocked today, even how many banks that we talk to, it seems that they have a hard time understanding the value.
Yeah.
But man, you go back 10 years ago and it was very different.
Very different. Yeah. I've seen a lot of changes.
Yeah.
I mean, go to the conference now and there's thousands of people there. When I was going to the conferences, it was at some casino in Vegas off the strip,
Yes,
some random place,
Yeah.
But, it's become such a well accepted asset class, with big funds involved, Wall Street, the REITs, they've helped to bring it along to be a little more sophisticated. And with that being said, we still have a small or a percentage that's still mom and pop.
Yeah.
And so that's what makes the property type unique, is you have the big, huge players like Public that obviously tried to make a big move this week.
Yep.
And then you've got, mom and pop that are running, their single, property drive up, asset for their family. And so it's very different. On the appraisal side, what happens is we're always kind of the last hurdle to finalize the deal with the bank. The appraisal comes in, everything's kind of been done, due diligence, environmental, all that stuff, and everybody's kind of waiting on the appraisal. So most of the time it's good news, sometimes it's bad news. But if we come in and right away we can pretty much tell kind of where, it's a story to tell is what we have to do in the appraisal.
Yeah.
We have to say, okay, buyer and seller came together. This is how it happened. And then you got to do a history on the property, how the property came about, talk about the transaction, talk to brokers, talk to other buyers, developers, so we're wearing a lot of different hats.
Yeah.
So if, what's the word I'm thinking of? If a bank hires us, then our goal is to essentially, the bank is our client.
Yeah.
So they're the ones that we're working for, even though the buyers, a lot of times, are writing the check for the appraisal.
Yes. Yes.
And it's a very odd sort of concept. And so it puts us sometimes in a very weird situation. But our goal is to be the bank's, advocate.
Yes.
So that's kind of the way it is. And it gets transmitted through the appraisal report.
Technology is the name of the game, and how you operate your facility and the efficiency at which you can operate will depend on the technology you use. Your property management system, what it allows you to do, and what you have access will determine the outcome of how that facility performs. That's why we go with Tenant Inc. with their product Hummingbird, because they are the best in class. When dealing with automation, when dealing with move-ins, customer acquisition process, improving my online acquisition process, they are bar none the best. So if you are looking to automate your facility or operate it in a best-in-class way, make sure you guys are looking at Tenant Inc. and their product Hummingbird. The link is in the description.
Gotcha. So you're touching on like the process, which I love. You're talking about at what point in the process you guys are jumping in, which, it's towards the end. Everybody's just kind of, done the due diligence, made sure the deal works, everything's good to go. You just need to get that appraisal, the value, loans need to close, all that kind of stuff. Let's go into the process of, you've got a storage facility. What does that look like? You got the order. You're going out doing the appraisal. What does that whole process look like for you? Boots on the ground and, coordination with all the parties involved.
Right. And so it's usually, if there's a buyer and seller, usually the contact is most likely the buyer because they're the one getting the loan, but then the seller is also, you have to work with as well because they still own the property. You have to get on the property, inspect the property, and do all that. So it's a matter of a lot of coordination because, you got to get the right reports, you got to get P&L statements, you got to get occupancy reports, unit mixes, rent rolls, and that all has to come from, hopefully from the bank, but sometimes you got to go to the buyer. So it does take a lot of coordination, and you really have to be organized and that would be the case in any appraisal, I think. Yeah. But with self-storage, the first thing I do is I go see if there's a website. What does it look like? What type of property is it gonna be drive up? Is it gonna be climate control, Class A, Class B, Class C? And then that gives me kind of an idea pretty quickly right away. And then if I can get the financials, if I can get the unit mix, the rent roll, then I can go through that and kind of have a better idea. If I can go through all that before I meet with anybody, then I have more of an idea of what the questions, which way I need to go with the questions.
Now, walk us through how you look at value. So if you are coming up, obviously you have a seller who's saying its values X, and then you have a buyer who may be agreeing on it, or they may be not agreeing on it, right? But you're coming in as more of an independent, which you're saying, I understand you guys have a strike price at X, but I need to come up with a value, and the bank's looking at you that says, all right, we get what these two agreed upon. That's fine. But outside these two, what is the value of this thing? And how do you come up with that to report that back to the bank? And when you do, after you come up with that value, how much does that price that is agreed upon play into it? And what does that look like if it's different?
Well, obviously definition of market value is willing buyer, willing seller.
Yes.
So if that's the situation, that's kind of your jumping off point.
Yeah.
Obviously if there's a sale price, it creates a little bit of gives you a little bit of a pathway. Yeah. But there have been times that I've seen sale prices and then I've gone through my analysis and I've been saying, well, what am I missing?
Yeah.
Because sometimes there's other things. And most of the time it could be very well, maybe there's some excess land that was part of the deal. Maybe there was some inventory. Maybe there was some other contracts. Maybe there's a cell tower or something on there that adds value that I didn't know about. But what I do is I use that sale price, and knowing that that's what the sale price is, and willing buyer, willing seller, and generally it works out pretty well. Now if it's a refinance and I don't have any number to work with, then I'm just going full independent. I put my numbers down, and then I have a general idea. I've done this long enough. I have a general idea probably where it's going to fall. Once I look at the financials, depending on where cap rates are at that time.
So are you taking a overall cap rate from the area and then looking at financials and trying to apply it to that given cap rate within an area? And is that taken off of other sales?
Other sales, yeah.
Oh, okay, got it.
Or, say, if I'm doing, say, a Class A property, real nice Class A property in Seattle.
Yeah.
Well, probably going to use some regional sales because there hasn't been a lot of sales.
Yes.
And a cap rate, maybe there's a cap rate in Portland that could work.
Yes.
Or if I'm in Denver, maybe there's a cap rate in, Austin or,
yes.
I mean, that's hopefully you get everything local.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the hope, but sometimes it doesn't always fit in this nice little box. So you have to be creative. And then of course it's what's the financial environment at the time.
Yeah.
Is one thing that we're seeing more and more of, and you guys probably see it too, is like CO deals or transactions of properties that are in lease up.
Yes.
So that's where that can be a real little bit more of a hurdle for us because we don't have anything historical to work off of. And so we really got to nail down our market rents, and we really got to survey the area, and hopefully you have maybe a stabilized pro forma you could work with.
Yeah.
And so that's a way to get value. Is
What is replacement? So like, and this is a really good point. Let's say you got a CO deal, right? And they're building it, and it's a nice multi-story A-class facility in a city where there's not a lot of that. You take an example of a city maybe like, whatever, Boise, where you don't have an A-class multi-story facility. Literally, there isn't a 4-story, storage facility on a freeway. So you have one. It's just been built. You got to appraise that thing, and there is no strike price for a buy. That's all of a sudden you're now looking at this going, well, is this like Seattle or whatnot? And how much does the cost of it play into it? So you're saying, all right, this cost X to build, and now I've got to find rates in the market that I think we could apply to that.
Yeah. First of all, you got to make sure your appraisal fee is high enough to take that assignment.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Key detail.
Don't leave any money on the table. Right?
So there's going to be a lot of work
into. In that situation, if we're working with something that's a little more atypical in a market, then you really have to learn why that person built it, what they think that they can get out of it. And as you know, self-storage is so localized.
Yes.
If someone says, "Hey, Denver's overbuilt," okay, that's a very general statement.
Yeah. Yes,
there's a lot of neighborhoods in Denver that don't have self-storage, and so going back to you were talking about value. Another thing that we do is we immediately take, what's the trade area? Is it 3 miles? Is it 5 miles? Where are the geographic barriers? And we drill down into that and figure out what's the other product in that trade area? Is it competitive? What's their occupancy rates? What are their market rates? What's the competition?
This is a tough one when you look at, I know we have areas where you're like, the whole idea that we're going to do is we're going to try to put an A-class somewhere where an A-class doesn't exist, but we believe we can get higher rents. There's just not that type of product or that business in the marketplace, so they can't ask for it because it's older, cheaper product. There's a risk or a gamble with that, obviously, because you're assuming that you can hit a market price that can't be measured.
Right.
And that's I'm assuming that can be tough as an appraiser and for a bank to go, all right, we got rents for drive up at $1 a square foot, but you're saying that for this nice new A-class facility, maybe even a good location, you can get up to $2 a square foot.
Right.
That's got to be a tough one to put your name behind.
That's why going back to what we were talking about before is it's super important that the appraiser who is picked to do the assignment in situations like that knows the asset class. Because any appraiser can do the appraisal, but where's the value from having all this, experience of doing appraisals? And I've done those things before. A lot of people on our team have done those appraisals before. And it really comes down to learning about the demographics, what's the population, what's the percentage of renters, what's the what drives self-storage? It's rooftops.
Yes.
Are rooftops growing? Where is an area that is it an urban area where you have a lot of renters but you don't have a lot of household growth? You have a suburban area where you have household growth, you don't have a lot of renters. So, those are the metrics that we use when we kind of go in and we, with all that, we make a call where we say the trade area is undersupplied, it's oversupplied, it's near equilibrium, and that helps you. Once you learn that, then you kind of have a better idea of what's the picture that's being painted.
Yeah.
Then you can get into the financials and say, okay, so if it's existing, the market, you kind of know how they're underwriting it. If it's proposed, you can look at what the way they underwrote it on a stabilized level. And that's when, as an appraiser, you got to make some hard calls.
Yeah.
You got to say, I don't think it's $2 rents.
Yeah.
I think it's maybe $1.75.
Yeah.
And and then, then you go through your expenses are a little bit easier to kind of put together because you got expense comps and, other stuff. But
what about the operator? Do you at all ever consider an operator in the market? Like, are you saying, okay, this facility is a great facility, but this is the first facility that they've ever bought bank. So I think a $2 rate, I don't know that they can achieve that. Now, if this was Extra Space, I think maybe they could achieve it, right? Is that something you would even have a discussion with the bank about or at all?
That's a good point. Like the execution, like people's expense ratios and different things would be different in that particular strategy of running that facility. We're talking about remote management and those different things coming into play nowadays too.
And just to be able to achieve that rent price.
Yeah.
Because, there's some operators, they can achieve 30-40% higher rent price in a given market.
Right. If they're going to push rents.
Yes.
Exactly. If they know.
They have dynamic pricing, if they can maximize rents and all that kind of stuff, as opposed to somebody else that is just looking more to the kind of match rents, and lease up and walk away, so to speak.
We see a lot of acquisitions where somebody's maybe ran it kind of mom and pop. They haven't run it to push rents. They haven't run it to, go to market levels to get, because you don't want to be 100%. You want to be, 90, get those people in at market. And maybe it sells for a higher price because that operator knows these are not at market rents. So, in that situation, I'd be more than happy to say, yes, this operator can certainly probably get to that rent level.
Yeah.
Based on their, like I said, dynamic pricing, having a website, call center, streamlining, expenses, getting to an NOI that's probably more at market levels.
And that comes back to a lot of times what we talk to people about is, this is a business and you need to express with the bank and the appraisers and everything, your business plan. So it's not like, explain to them how you're going to execute on this property and on this strategy. Just like an investor or just like anybody else, they need to have confidence that those metrics and things can be hit. And the lack of confidence in a bank or anybody else is going to be the lack of confidence of value that can be achieved.
Right, and that's a good that touches on a good point. It's the real estate component is what it is, but there is also that management side. It's super important. I've seen case studies where I've walked into facilities and the first person I see is not a welcoming person. Yeah, not a bad person, but somebody maybe they're in sweats, and just does like, oh, I got it, I understand. And then you walk in after maybe it's been purchased. And there's a refinance and it's totally different. You go, that's why market rents were achievable because they knew how to run it.
Let's say worst case scenario. This is something that I'm thinking about too. Let's say, and I'm sure, and you could probably touch on this, that banks are pretty good about finding individuals like yourself and firms like Cushman, Wakefield that know how to value storage and these assets that they're lending on. But let's say they don't. Let's say they have an appraisal that it goes wrong. It's not accurate. It's not right.
Yeah.
What does that scenario look like?
Well, we've never done that at Cushman Wakefield.
Of course.
No mistake.
Never.
Every appraisal has
been perfect.
Yes, exactly. At least in the last 2 years since on my watch. I have gotten calls from chief appraisers or loan officers saying, I've got this appraisal here and it's darn near worthless.
Yeah.
I need some help.
Yep.
What do I do? Now, I have to be real careful because I can't opine on the existing appraisal because as an appraiser, I would be giving an appraisal.
Yeah.
And you're not supposed to do that. So, but I could say, oh, well, are there specifics about it that I would know a little bit more about? Would I know the trade area? Would I know the property? Is there something, and then just tell the lender, hire us next time.
Yeah. It's, we had this actually happen to us. We had well, I've had it twice. We had an appraisal once that we got back, and we told the bank, we're like, we'll pay for another appraisal, but this is not right. It's just not. It's wrong.
Right. Yeah.
And then we had another one where interesting motives. The asset was owned by a public entity. And the appraisal, it was going to auction, and the appraisal came in at, the number, which was very low, to say the least. And we went and hired an appraiser, and we said, we're going to go get our own personal appraisal, right? Uh-huh. And we went and got the appraisal, and it came back, it was appraised at 3.5. We got ours done. We gave our data. We worked with the bank and their appraiser, and they came back at $6 million. And we went into that auction, the only people having gotten another appraisal. So everybody else in that auction had taken the appraisal from the state to give to the financial institutions.
3.5 million one?
3.5 million. Yeah. And we walked in and we picked that thing up, and the 6 million was low. I mean, it was like it was worth 10 million in 3 months. And we came in, and it was like we were operating on a totally different playbook.
Yeah.
And I've seen this happen where the appraisal kind of shook the whole entire thing in the market. And I'm like, I get it why the appraiser and the state wanted a low appraisal. They wanted to show they had a big win and everything else. But it took us a little homework. Yeah, it took us some extra cost. But that one thing right there, I can legitimately say made us $4 million in 1 year on that property.
Yeah.
I mean, crazy.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I'm sure you've seen, like you said, you've had that happen to you where the appraisals came in and you just said, this is not going to work.
Yeah.
So the really important thing that people should know about appraisal is if you're going through a lender, they have to order the appraisal if you want to get the financing. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
You can't hire appraiser, third party, and then take it to the lender, and they can't accept it.
Yeah.
So I always, if I get a call from a property owner or somebody, I say, the first thing you need to do is figure out who your lender is. I'll be happy to put a bid in when that time comes, but don't hire and waste your time and money because no lender will accept it.
100%. And that's why it's a partnership too. And even that's how we look at the appraisers. They may not work for us, but we look at it as we're here working with the bank to try to make sure, because honestly, we want to know, meaning that if there's something, we're in the middle of buying a property. So if that appraiser comes back and sees something that we don't, I want to know. We want the bank to know and everybody to understand. So you should really try to be giving the bank, and the more information, in my view, that you could give to the appraiser and the bank, the more you're helping yourself out and making it easier.
There have been times there have been situations where I've been told, well, I don't want you to have my financials.
Yeah.
Because I don't want you to know. Like, well, then that doesn't help me at all.
Yeah.
I don't want you to have my unit mix. Well, do you want me to guess? Because trust me,
it's going to hurt you.
Guess right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's going to be in your loss, not mine.
I got to go conservative.
At some point, I've got to pull the trigger on something.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that has happened sometimes, and that's more the mom and pop sort of. Yeah. A little more. Like cards close to the vest a little bit.
That's good to know though too. If you're buying it and you've got to work with that mom pop, and they're not working with, or two, you may have, I don't know if you've ever run into where they really just don't even have the information.
I was thinking about that when you were talking about P&Ls and things like that. I was like, if they have them.
If they have them, I hand you a stack of cards. So here's my IOUs and my lease agreements.
Yeah. It is funny though. Like there have been times on development deals where I'll get a pro forma and there'll be no line item for property taxes. And I'll go back and I'll say, did you have a property tax study? No. You probably have to pay property taxes on, or insurance or utilities or, a lot of times, especially you'll get the no third-party management. That's the big thing. When we do our appraisals, we always include a third-party management fee because we assume prudent management.
Yeah.
And I mean, with your management, you have to have that.
We include it in.
Right.
Yes.
If everything in that appraisal, all those conclusions go back to prudent management. And so part of that is your rent growth. We're going to assume rent growth at a market or level, or maybe a little more aggressive, depending on where the asset is. But we're also going to put in that 4 or 5%, offsite management fee.
And do you use do you use feasibility studies? Do you go get them, or do you make them internally? Or if they have them done, do you get access to those usually?
So we have a couple people that do feasibility studies. If one's been done, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. That helps in the rents. Now, we have to be real clear that, what we're doing is independent of everybody else.
Yes.
So our conclusions aren't, feasibility studies, zoning studies, property tax studies, property condition reports.
Yes.
Anything I can get my hands on. I ask for anything.
Want to know.
I start big, and then I kind of whittle it down and see what I can get.
And I think, kind of moving on here too, talk to us about the market and what you've seen in the last 6 months, changes on both sides. I think be interested to hear on the banks, their viewpoints, the questions they're asking, as well as what you're seeing as far as buyers and sellers on the other side right now.
Well, mathematically, interest rates go up, cap rates go up. Mm-hmm. That's just kind of the way it is. I mean, that's just, we all know that. Yeah. Now, with that being said, it's not a blanket, it's not a black and white statement. So what I do and what I encourage our team to do is go out. Now's a great time to talk to brokers, buyers, developers. Hey, what are you seeing? What are you seeing? Well, towards the end of the year, we saw a lot of deals get retraded, or didn't close, or there was some sort of creative financing that had to get the deal done. We've seen some seller financing deals, which we haven't seen in years because we haven't had to. And so what we've done as a group is we're kind of on a very general level, we're seeing cap rates at about 25 to 50 basis points higher. Mm-hmm. Now, in some areas, it's 25. In some areas, it may be closer to 100 basis points. The sunshine states, the smile states, what they call it, real hot. People are moving there. And so there's a lot of activity in those states. Like we're still getting requests for a lot of appraisals. Florida, the Gulf Coast, Texas, Arizona. But I feel like the regional banks are still somewhat active. Credit unions still been getting bids from credit unions. I feel like the bigger banks are a little more nervous to lend. Haven't probably gotten as many bids, from some of the larger banks. I think they feel like they're on the sidelines a little bit more. And this is only for self-storage, of course. Yeah. But flip side is I've done 2 appraisals on proposed deals on the West Coast that have been 2 of some of the nicest proposed properties I've ever seen.
Yeah.
But it's private money.
Yeah.
That's where, and that's the interesting segment of where self-storage is. You're seeing some big time players come into the, and if you're an office developer or an office investor right now, self-storage looks pretty good.
Yep, exactly.
Not all office is bad, but I mean, why not? And so I think as of now, I've been getting a lot of questions from banks. How are you guys looking at it? On the appraisal side, what are you guys doing as a group? And I said, the data's not there because we haven't had as many deals close. And so there's a lot of market participant discussions we're having, a lot of anecdotal stuff out there for us. It's hard because everything in an appraisal every conclusion has to have some sort of data point to support it. And in a lot of cases, we're having, with the lack of data that's closed, we have to really get a little bit deeper and talk more on the, what are the investment terms? Yeah. And banks are really interested in what is the ratio, of like here,
the DCR.
yeah, the DCR. That's
coverage
been
ratio.
brought up a lot
Yeah.
to me on some deals, and especially like proposed deals that I may have done in the summer come back, and the lender said, okay, so we're giving it a second look. Our ratios, maybe we're thinking that a little bit.
Yep.
Cap rate, we're not so concerned about.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, when can this property start servicing that debt?
Yes.
What year is it? What year is that going to be?
Yeah.
So, but also as a group, we're talking, and especially in a cash flow situation, is typically there's a little bit of a delta between your going in and going out cap rate. And, could that be a little bit lower? I mean, our interest rate's going to come back down in the next 5 years. So if you're looking at a 5 to 10 year hold, where's the is the risk there? Well, for self-storage, it's proven it's pretty resilient.
Yeah.
We saw it in 2010, saw it during COVID. It's not as risky asset as it used to be.
Yep.
So going back to your question about lenders, what are we seeing? A lot of uncertainty, but I think it's really up to us on the appraisal side to be the consultants and be the ones to be able to communicate to the banks. This is what we're seeing out there. This is what deals are not getting done. Not every deal is not getting done.
Yes. What can people do when they're out trying to knock down a facility or get a development and they know that the bank has requested, obviously, an appraiser? What should be in the forefront of their mind, and what can they do to help you guys with your job?
Well, on a new deal or just an existing?
Yeah, I think in general, new deal, existing deal that they're buying from maybe a seller, maybe seller financed, or they're doing a development.
So on a new deal, there's a group that I work with, and they know exactly what they give me. Everything. They give me renderings, they give me cash flows, they give me costs, they give me budgets. They give me everything. I mean, going back to the point, the more I have on a new deal, it helps me tell the story in the appraisal.
Yeah.
Because we don't have a history.
Yeah.
There's no P&L statements. There's nothing. It's only what the developer has budgeted up to a stabilized number or a going out number. So, and I'm pretty frank with the banks. If I don't have that information by a certain time, then I can't do the appraisal. We got to go on hold. And usually, if the hold word comes up, that scares everybody, and so everybody gets their stuff to me. Yeah. On a sale deal, it's financials, it's occupancy reports. Occupancy statistics reports, I guess is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I guess that's what SiteLink has it at.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything? Was it listed for sale? Had it ever been listed for sale? Do you have any previous offers? Had you thought about selling it before? What's some recent CapEx work that you've done to the property?
How much does that play in? So let's say it's a property and the negotiated price is a 4 cap, but you go onto the property and you're like, all right, this is a $3 million asset at a 4 cap, but there's at least $600,000 worth of repairs that you're going, I honestly believe this needs to be done. Not like it's, oh, it would be nice if we made it look good. But you're sitting here going, no, this will need to be done in the next 2 years.
Yeah.
What do you do in that situation, and how does that apply to the value and the communication you're having? Because maybe too, even the buyer may not even know that.
Yeah.
Right? They may go, well, I didn't know that there were those issues. Do I have to change those? They may not know.
Hopefully they do, but
Yes.
if there's something that we would identify as that would stop the property from gaining revenue. I mean, that's really kind of the benchmark, right?
Yeah, like is roofs, so you can't occupy units, or doors that won't open.
Right, or a big hole in the asphalt or something like that. That's kind of the basic. Like you said, paint, signage, fencing.
That's if they want to do it,
right? Whatever. I mean, you can still run them. If it was unknown and I'm the person to find out about it, that's probably not a good thing. But I would immediately go back to the bank and say, you're going to lend on a troubled asset.
Yeah.
That really has some risks to it. So I would get somebody out here to give an estimate as to what it's going to cost to fix that. Nice. So what I would do is I would either deduct that in my appraisal, that amount.
Yeah.
In like an as-is scenario, say, okay, well, here's the value, deduct that CapEx, and then this is your number.
Yeah.
Because you always want to assume, like I said, going back, prudent management, you want to assume all the units are being rented, and then you kind of work backwards from that.
Yeah. And then normally, I guess, at that point, the bank or whoever would need to order in a property condition report, or if it's roofing or whatever that may be.
Right.
And then it would be up to the bank to order those things.
Yeah. And most of the time, we're pretty much, they know that most of the time up front. Like when we do the appraisal, if we get a RFP for an appraisal, it in the notes, it may say, hey, roof on building 5 is defective, and they're in the process of getting a bid for it or something like that.
Yeah, I was going to touch on that, where that property condition report and that initial due diligence, and just the importance of getting those initial surveys done with your ALTAs, your zoning reports, the phase 1s, the property condition reports, getting even expanded property condition reports like we've had to do on, roofing, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, just the big ticket items, asphalt, all those different aspects. It makes a ton of sense because you're going to be required to get those things from the bank anyway.
Sure.
And, that's going to help you get a more solid value. So from the buyer side, 100% get those surveys, have them lined up. They're not cheap, but it's a lot cheaper than, trying to close on an asset or do something that you shouldn't do to begin with. Then the other thing on the buyer side that you're kind of touching on is just having that historical, operational and financial data to be able to provide you as clear as possible, because that's I think we run into that on every deal where it's like, oh yeah, we don't have that. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Because it's not like an apartment where you can go in and go, okay, this is clearly a 2-bedroom, 1 bath. You could open the door and say, it's 10 by 10. Could it be a 10 by 12? Could it be that is profoundly important. To have the unit mix and the financials are the two real things those are the jumping off points for sure.
Yes.
But yeah, to your, and really, if you look at the components of a self-storage, what are the major things that could stop revenue? It's roofs, it's doors, it's asphalt, gates. Mm-hmm. I mean, those are kind of the major ones. But other than that, it's not like if a sewer line is broken, you can still operate, or if a water line, maybe it affects the resident manager, but or if you got a climate control, maybe the HVAC units are out or something like that. So, but those
are a handful of big items.
Big items. Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome.
Yeah, no, that's sweet.
Well, before we wrap up here, another question that I would have on looking forward here, where do you see values headed into this next year? I think a lot of people are wondering, we've talked about a move in cap rate. We've talked about, but there's still demand. We don't have as much properties are for sale, but we have more money coming in. Do you see us kind of stabilizing in the first of the year, or do you think there's still room for cap rates to rise?
That is the question, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
If I had a nickel for every time I had that over the last 6 months, I'd be a super rich man. I feel like just on the storage side, I feel like cap rates have settled a little bit. Mm-hmm. I feel like everybody, back in October, we all weren't sure where we were going. We had the war in Ukraine, the gas prices were going up. We had the external factors that we couldn't control.
Yes.
The COVID stuff in China. I mean, all that stuff affected us, but we couldn't do anything about it. So, but I think, we're 6 months later. The sky hasn't fallen.
Yeah.
Storage still seems to be well liked. The REITs lost a little bit over the last year, but they're always going to be players. I mean, that's the thing, is you've got the REITs that are always going to go out with money and say, here's I want that facility, and I don't care what the cap rate is.
Yep.
I feel like maybe we've kind of stabilized a little bit.
Yeah.
At about that 25 to 50 basis point. But I feel like if rates go down, we're going to probably see a movement downward as well.
Yeah.
But again, you really got to be, you got to be real prudent in what's your trade area, what's the competition, what's your facility like.
Yeah.
It's really facility specific.
Really,
too,
facility specific.
Yeah.
No, I couldn't agree more with you. Well, where people listening to this, where can they go to reach out to you, ask questions? Where can we send people?
So, Cushman Wakefield, we have a self-storage group established for 15 years, 30 team members across the country. It's Cushman Wakefield self-storage is really, you put that into Google, you're going to get to us.
Okay.
And then my contact information will be there. But you can also get a hold of me. My email is tim.garey, Garey @cushwake.com.
Awesome.
And I am happy to discuss self-storage. I'm happy to help anybody out. If there's new people that are just looking into it, I will be more than happy to take the time to discuss it. I think it's important the more information we have.
100%.
So anybody can reach out and talk to me. I'm happy to do that for sure.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate it. That's awesome. That'll be in the show notes. And thank you for coming down and giving us a look and insight to your world. I think it's very, very helpful for people to see.
It is.
Well, appraisals, as I was saying, is very exciting.
Very exciting.
Very exciting.
I think so, and I may be crazy, but
Yeah.
I don't know who as a kid grows up and goes, you know what? I just want to be an appraiser.
That's how we most of us end up, though.
that's right. I don't think I ever thought I'd be in storage.
I know.
but there we go.
I know. Wasn't great in. Was I great in math or was I great in writing? Now I'm writing about math. Okay, so that's how did that happen?
That's awesome. Right on. Well, thanks for coming. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, guys.